New videos every day.
The person who's clinically depressed has got a way skewed, unrealistically negative view of themselves. So if you just pull back to accurate, that's a lot rosier picture than the one you've been living in. So it's not about unrealistic positive thinking. It's really about accurate thinking.
Thank you for tuning in. You're watching Alternative Health, and I'm your host, Karina Rachel. I'm joined today by Dr. Colin Ross, and our topic is cognitive therapy for treatment of depression. So let me know if depression is something that you've experienced or if you've actually received a diagnosis of depression. Thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thank you.
So today we're going to be discussing cognitive therapy, which is a treatment for depression that you had mentioned actually has a lot of different clinical trials and findings behind it. So I'm anxious to learn more.
Well, the first textbook was 1978, I'm pretty sure it was the year, Cognitive Therapy of Depression by Aaron Beck and 3 other authors. And then since then, cognitive therapy has been widely studied and also been expanded for anxiety, psychosis, all kinds of different mental health problems. Mm-hmm. But there really are many dozens of randomized controlled trials, which is the highest level of evidence you can get. So there's no question that cognitive therapy works for depression, not for everybody, but for a substantial number of people. Mm-hmm. So if you don't want to take antidepressants, or you've tried antidepressants and they haven't worked or they've had bad side effects, cognitive therapy is a very proven, accepted, science-based kind of model for treating depression. Mm-hmm. And it's called cognitive therapy because it deals with your thinking and your cognitions. Mm-hmm. The way I personally do cognitive therapy is kind of an expanded version, but the core principles are the same. And the idea is, like, just a quick example would be, say a woman's living alone, she's upstairs, she's just gone to bed, she hears a noise downstairs. She says to herself, a burglar just broke in, he's going to come upstairs and attack me. Well, then what's going to happen to her feelings? Well, she's going to have a whole bunch of fear, panic, alarm, terror. Mm-hmm. Her heart rate's going to go up, her adrenaline's going to be pumping out. Whereas if it's exactly the same situation, exactly the same noise, and she goes, the dog's always knocking over the water bowl, then she's just going to maybe be a little bit annoyed and go to sleep. Mm-hmm. So the idea is that no matter what's going on in reality, the way you think about it can strongly affect how you feel, mm-hmm. and then what your body does and what you do with your behavior. Right. Therefore, if you can change your thinking, in this example, if you go, wait a minute, there's never been a break-in in this neighborhood, everything's dead-bolted, the mm-hmm. alarm system is on, it can't be somebody breaking in, it's most likely just the dog. You can actually talk yourself down, right. And then your adrenaline settles down, your heart settles down, everything settles down. Mm-hmm. So that's the basic core idea of cognitive therapy. But in depression, it's not so much anxiety and fear, it's sad, blue, down in the dumps, hopeless, helpless, no future, feeling suicidal, nothing tastes good, nothing's enjoyable. That's basically the picture of depression. Mm-hmm. And you can have increased sleep with depression, but more commonly you have decreased sleep. So then you're short on sleep, so then you're more tired, then you don't have enough energy for life, then everything seems too much, then everything seems hopeless, and then you get your mood down, then because your mood's down, you don't have the motivation, and it just becomes a vicious, positive feedback loop kind of cycle. Mm-hmm. So what would that have to do with your thinking? Well, I don't think I've ever met somebody with depression who doesn't have really skewed negative thinking about yourself, about the world outside you, and about the future. So, and a lot of this ties back into abuse and neglect in childhood, but not all the time. Mm-hmm. So commonly the person feels bad about themselves. I'm no good, I'm unworthy, I'm not as good as everybody else, I'm a burden, the world would be better off without me. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of thoughts about the world, it's all nobody loves me, nobody values me, everything's negative, nothing ever is going to happen good in life.
Right.
And then you just project that into the future. So one of the kind of principles of cognitive therapy is, which you can do on your own, and there's self-help books that you can find at a bookstore or on Amazon. But if you're working with a therapist, the therapist is going to help you to take a step back
Right.
and go, okay, hold on a second. So I have feeling and the belief that I'm useless and worthless. Well, instead of this is like a law of physics that we know to be true for a fact, which is how the person feels, let's step back a bit and look at this as a hypothesis. Instead of it's a fact that I'm just locked into. So as soon as you take that step back, then you can go, oh, okay, so I have the theory or the hypothesis or the belief that I'm unworthy and useless. Well, like any hypothesis, we want to say, well, what's the evidence? What's the evidence in favor of that? What's the evidence against that? And then you actually do a systematic review. Okay, so hold on a second here. Well, I have children who love me unconditionally. I have a husband who loves me unconditionally. So that doesn't really fit with I'm useless and worthless. And then in therapy, I'll try and get the person to look at themselves through the eyes of the person who loves them.
Right.
So, which you can then just do yourself as an exercise. So there's only two explanations for why these people seem to want me in their lives and seem to care about me. Either my evaluation of myself is off and skewed and negative and not accurate, or they're delusional. So when I say, well, okay, so is your husband or your daughter delusional? Nobody ever goes, yeah. They always go, well, no. Okay, so if they're not delusional, well, then whose evaluation of you is more accurate? And then I actually try and generate a list. Okay, if I was asking your loved one, or if I was asking you, and you were telling me accurately, what are some positive things about you? And the person who's just explained how they're useless, worthless, the world would be better off without them, often can quickly come up with, well, I'm a good friend, I'm a good listener, I'm a kind person, I have a good sense of humor, I work hard, I'm loyal. And before you know it, we've got 6, 7, 8 items on a list that absolutely don't fit with I'm useless and worthless.
Right.
So then you can draw up these lists yourself. So then we go, okay, so turns out you're the only perfect person on the planet. No. Okay, so there's going to be a few items on the negative side of the list. So maybe you've lied to your boss once, or maybe you've done this, or maybe you've done that. So we're not trying to paint this like ridiculous, rosy, I'm perfect picture. We're trying to do an accurate, realistic assessment. Okay, so we got a few negative things that you wish you hadn't done or hadn't said, but let's balance that against the positive items. So it's all about balancing and having, instead of I only see the negative and I'm all focused on the negative, take a step back, see the negative, see the positive, reevaluate, balance it out.
Right.
Which you can do yourself as like just a little thinking exercise or writing exercise. Actually write out lists. Then so therapy's got many things. It's not just you do one thing. So another thing is to do this kind of life inventory. Okay, well, here's the kind of childhood I had. Here's what's been going on the last 5, 10 years. Here's all the stresses. Here's all the losses. If I've been abused or abandoned or betrayed, what's going to be the normal feeling that comes from that? So maybe some of these feelings are no fun. They're painful, but they're just evidence that I'm a normal person who's been through some sad and difficult things. So then instead of I'm useless, I'm worthless, I'm bad, I'm not like other people, I just happen to be a person who's had some bad luck in life.
Right.
So then you start reevaluating yourself. Okay, well, I've had some bad luck in life. How do I expect to be feeling with all this stuff that's gone on? Well, then I've gotten a little too down in the bottom of the rut and I've lost sight of the whole perspective. So it's both a balanced evaluation of the positive and the negative, and kind of giving yourself a break for having some negative feelings and maybe having done some negative things.
Right.
Because it's not a crime to fail to be perfect. And another theme is exactly that, failing to be perfect. So either you've just kind of got it from yourself or you got it from your family growing up. Well, we love you as long as straight A's, you're on the basketball team, you're on the cheerleading team, you're this, and this, and this, and this. And if you come home with a B, it's not just the teacher was in a bad mood or, nobody's perfect or, well,
Too
try
many
harder next time.
extracurriculars started taking a toll on your grades.
But that one B becomes this, quite a few families operate like this. This one B becomes this mortal wound that you've inflicted on your parents because they've tried so hard and all they want is the best. And now you've almost killed them, like you've stabbed them with a spear sort of thing by bringing home this B. So now you become the perpetrator of this horrible feelings that you've imposed on your mom and your dad. So then you got to try even harder to be perfect. So you get on this desperate treadmill, which is exhausting by itself. And you can't be perfect. So it's a setup for guaranteed failure.
Right.
In the meantime, back in the family you grew up in, there's real serious shortage of unconditional love. It just wasn't kind of a lovey-dovey family. But as long as you performed, you got some conditional love. But even that conditional love was just out of your grasp a little bit. And then if you, say, develop an illness or you're too stressed out at college or something bad happens or a drunk driver hits you and you can't maintain your level of performance, you crash down to total failure.
Right.
And then when you crash down to total failure, there's no unconditional love. The conditional love all just appeared. Now you're useless, worthless, of no value to anybody. So part of the strategy is reevaluating what exactly are your performance criteria here? Are they reasonable? Are they fair? Would you have that expectation for somebody else? Like if you were a good mom or a good dad and you had a child, would you put them through all those hoops? Why not? Because they don't deserve it.
Right.
Well, maybe you didn't deserve it either.
So just kind of helping them to, kind of take a third person perspective, maybe try to see in from the outside. And then such an important thing that I don't think can be stressed enough is like you said about the life inventory, looking at what we've been through and trying to, maybe reason that the things we're feeling are just reactions to things that we've been through. It's not that suddenly this feeling that I'm a failure and I hate myself and I'm a horrible person just came from nowhere. But that maybe it's a reaction to, abuse that you've experienced or parents that expected too much of you and made you always feel like a failure, things like that. Just kind of bringing some understanding around our feelings rather than seeing them as something that we can't help or just came from nowhere.
Right. Now, on the opposite side, occasionally somebody will be seriously, heavily depressed, and it's just because their thyroid is off. The thyroid is very low. Their life has been fairly regular, normal, and happy. Or they have some sort of really severe flu and then develop kind of a chronic fatigue picture with a lot of depression mixed in. And then 3 months, 6 months later, they come out of that. And it was a medical thing. So that can happen sometimes.
And we did a whole video on vitamin D as well, which could be another, physical health, situation or condition that can actually manifest in these different emotional.
My basic advanced theory of how this works is the hip bone is connected to the thigh bone. I say that all the time. So your mind, your body, your emotions, your thoughts, your life story, your biology, that's all tied together. And there's not just one approach. So for depression, there's getting to be a set of studies, it's not a huge amount of studies, showing that an aerobic exercise program probably works about as well as antidepressants, which work about as well as cognitive therapy. Cognitive therapy probably a little better. But the funny thing is that placebo also works relatively well for like about a third of people who are seriously clinically depressed will get better on placebo. But that begs the question, why does placebo work? Well, placebo is kind of like self-cognitive therapy by mistake. Because the only thing that's going on when you take a placebo and your depression goes away is you're going, I'm on antidepressant, I'm going to get better, there is hope, I'm not stuck in this forever, which is all changing your thinking. Because the placebo doesn't change anything about your chemistry.
Right.
It only can affect the meaning you give to the situation, the way you look at it, and changing your mindset to optimism and hope.
Right.
So obviously you could do that without taking the placebo pill if you put your mind to it, which is what cognitive therapy is.
Excellent.
And so that kind of done by accident self-cognitive therapy is actually a huge part of what makes medications work. And how much of it is the actual medication, I'm pretty doubtful that that's a big part of it.
Right. I definitely think it's very interesting. Again, we have an entire interview where you discussed the clinical trials that actually show antidepressants to be about as effective as a placebo. But I think it's very interesting, kind of looking at all of these things and seeing that, just if we think that we're doing something that's going to help our depression, even if it's a sugar pill, a placebo, it actually will have some positive effects on us.
And that doesn't mean you're being silly or impressionable. That's just how it works. And so it's like depression, you could say, this is stretching it a bit, but you could say depression is just a negative placebo that you've given yourself a lot of the time. And because life isn't really that hopeless. So you can be clinically depressed, you own your own house, you're employed, you have a good relationship, your kids are all doing well. So it's not about the current reality of the present. It's something negative in your thinking that's inaccurate, not really realistic, has pushed you down into depression. So then the placebo effect is just pulling yourself back out with positive thinking.
Showing, helping you improve your perceived reality, versus your...
And oftentimes, it's not about putting on these rose-colored glasses and saying everything's wonderful when it's not. Because the person who's clinically depressed has got a way skewed, unrealistically negative view of themselves. So if you just pull back to accurate, that's a lot rosier picture than the one you've been living in. So it's not about unrealistic positive thinking. It's really about accurate thinking.
Excellent. Any other thoughts that you'd like to share?
I think that's good for this.
Excellent. So we are going to continue this series with some more helpful strategies. I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
Always my pleasure.
And thank you so much for watching. I do hope that you found this video helpful. If you did, please let me know in the comments section down below. We'd love to know your thoughts, any topic requests or questions you may have. Please feel free to leave those for us. I hope you'll subscribe to the Psyche Truth channel so you can come back and join me again in the future. I hope you have a beautiful day. Thank you so much for watching.